In this video, we're going to be going over how to code a game called Survival. If you haven't done any of our other advanced sketches or games yet, I recommend you do those before you work on this one. It's pretty complicated. And basically the point of this game is that you are going to be a small rectangle chased around the screen by a large circle, and your goal is to remain alive for as long as you can. We're just going to add in rect mode center in the function setup to help us with the distance formula later on. Then we're going to add in 4 variables, one for player X, one for player Y, one for our player speed, and another for the timer because, like I said, we want to see how long we can escape the enemy in this game. So once you have your variables all set up, we're just going to start setting up the scene for our game. So I'm just going to use a basic background, and then I'm going to make my character a rectangle. You can choose to make your character an ellipse if you'd like, or you can choose to make it bigger than I'm making mine. It's really up to you. The more complicated part we're about to get into is how to use our key commands. So this is where you should really be paying attention. Start making your rectangle at coordinates of player X and player Y, and then get ready to add a color. And I'm going to get rid of the outlines, like I said, just because I don't like the way that they look. So this is just a style choice. You can make yours look however you want. You can choose different colors, different sizes. And the next thing we're going to do are the key commands. So we want our player to be able to move with the up, down, left, and right arrows. So to use the arrow commands, we're going to do if statements. And inside of the parentheses, we'll say if key is down, all one word, no spaces, with a capital I for is and a capital D for down. Then we're going to want to go to our settings, turn on our key picker, and we're going to want to find the key command to move up. Then we're going to have to think about, okay, what is changing when we press this key? With the up arrow, the Y value is getting smaller. So we're going to have player Y equals player Y minus 1. You're going to do the same thing for all 4 key commands. I just copy and pasted it and was editing it just as a way to save some time. That's a really easy way for you to make these key commands go a little bit faster. So don't forget to use that key picker, and remember to pay attention to whether you're talking about the player's X value or the player's Y value. If you notice that he's not traveling the way that you want your character to travel, it's probably because you have those player X or player Y's wrong, or you have the plus or minus sign wrong. So pay attention to those. I'm also going to add some comments just so if while I'm moving my character around the screen, I realize that he's not moving the right way, I can go back and see, okay, the left arrow isn't working. Let's go find out what's going on. So you can see that my character is moving around the screen just fine, but he can disappear. That's not exactly a good way to have a game where you're trying to run away from someone, because they could easily just run off the screen and hide there. So we're going to add in a few conditional statements to make some boundaries. We're going to say if your player's X value is greater than the biggest X number available, which in this case is 850, then we want our player's X value to stay at 850. We want our player X to equal 850. So let's run over there and see if that's working. Once I get to the edge, I can see, all right, that is stopping. I'm continuously pressing the right arrow key and nothing's happening. So I'm going to want to do that for all 4 walls. Again, you can copy this if that's easier and just paste 4 of them down there because you'll need 4 of them. That's completely up to you. So I did that for my player's X value, my player's Y value, and I did it at the highest point and the lowest point. So once you put these in, make sure that you are testing everything along the way so that you're not noticing later on when you're almost done with the game that something's wrong with it. Also, using comments are really great because then you can say, okay, my left boundary isn't working, and you can go right back to where you wrote left boundary and fix it. The next thing I'm going to want to do is talk about our enemy. So we're going to call our enemy ball X, and we're going to make it equal 500, and then it needs a Y coordinate too. So we're going to do a variable for ball Y, and that's going to be equal to 300. The next thing we'll need is a speed, and for our ball, since it's bouncing off of the walls, we're going to have a speed X and a speed Y. You'll understand why in just a minute when we start talking about making the boundaries for the ball. So first things first, we want to actually make our ball appear on the screen. So we're going to make an ellipse at the coordinates of ball X and ball Y, and we'll make it 100 by 100. You'll want to make it a different color just so it's not confusing. And once you have that ready to go, we can start talking about making our ball move. So we're going to use that magic line that we've used already where we say ball X equals ball X plus speed X in this case. We'll do the same thing for Y with speed Y. And this is going to allow us to have the balls bounce off of the walls, but you're noticing that they're not doing that yet. That's because, just like we did for our player, we also have to set some boundaries. In this case, we're going to say if, and then in parentheses, ball X is greater than whatever the greatest X value is, 850 in this case. Our speed is going to equal negative speed, and it's not just any speed, it's speed X in this case because we're talking about ball X. You'll continue to do this for all 4 walls using ball X or ball Y, and make sure that when you're using ball X, you're using speed X. When you're using ball Y, you're using speed Y. You can see that I'm paying really close attention to the opening and closing curly brackets. When you start doing more complicated games like this, you really need to pay attention to what's going inside of the curly brackets and what's going outside of it. If, let's say, I accidentally combine 2 of these, put them inside of the same curly bracket, they wouldn't work the way that I want them to. So you can see those little downward facing arrows right next to the numbers where you start an if statement. If you click on those, it'll close it up and turn it into an actual little sandwich looking thing. That is awesome. You can use those to make sure that only the stuff you want inside of those curly brackets is going inside of it. If you notice that lines of code are missing that shouldn't be, you need to go back and change where your curly brackets are. Next thing we're going to work on is our timer. We want it to go up by seconds, so we're just going to say timer equals timer plus 1/60th. You can try playing around with this if you want your timer to be a little bit different, but that's going to be more of a standard timer. Next, we want our timer to display. In this case, we want our timer to be rounded. Try having it without a rounded timer. It's not very easy to read. So we're going to say text and then in parentheses, round, another set of parentheses, and timer. Then you just want to give it the X and Y location of where you want it to go. You can put a text size in there above where you did the text command to change the size of it, make it a little bit more readable. And I'm going to change the color of it as well, just to make it so that everything isn't blending in. All right, so the last thing we want to do is actually have it so that this game is winnable or losable, right? So we want to make our conditional statement that checks the distance between our enemy and our character. So we're going to say if dist, and then in a set of parentheses, the player X coordinate, player Y coordinate, ball X coordinate, and the ball Y coordinate. So if the distance between player X and player Y, so our player, and ball X and ball Y, our ball, is less than 50, then with a set of curly brackets, we'll say we want a background that is black to come up. You can choose any color you want. I just chose black. We want speed X and speed Y to stop. That will make it 0. That'll make it stop so that the game isn't playable anymore. It's not saying, oh, actually you didn't lose. So we want to do that. And then we want to add some text in there that says game over, something like that. You lose, try again. This is a great place to add in some buttons where you can actually play the game from the beginning again, or you can maybe go back to a home screen if you have a home screen built in. So we'll have our ball bouncing around the screen. And I'm noticing that my character isn't really moving fast enough, and also 50 isn't exactly the right number. So you might want to play around with the number that you choose for the distance, depending on how big or small your player and your enemy are. So I'm just going to change that number to 75 instead of 50. Then I want my player to be able to move a little bit faster. So where I said if keys are down, I want my player Y to equal player Y minus a certain number plus a certain number. I'm going to change those to 5. So now I can move faster around the screen, which makes it a little bit more of a playable game.